Hello and welcome to this Daily Journal webcast tonight, analyzing the results of the Major Thoroughfare election that was held tonight. I'm Chris Kiefer, managing editor for multimedia here at the Daily Journal, and I'm joined by Caleb Bedillion, our local government reporter. Caleb, it was a pretty overwhelming election tonight, maybe kind of as seemed to be expected. Kind of tell us about the results and kind of what we can learn from them.
Right. The Major Thoroughfare Program was renewed for another 5 years at today's special election. The results were, as you said, fairly overwhelming in support of renewal. Nearly 90% of Tupelo voters that participated in the election backed the program's renewal. And now the fact that the program is renewed, what that means is that a 10 mil tax levy will continue for the next 5 years. Now, 90%, that's a big number, but it is in line with the last elections. In 2011, something like 82% of voters supported the program. The cycle before that, in 2006, something like 85% of voters. So, with the exception of the first vote that was in 91 when the program was created, and in that vote about I think 56% of voters supported it. So that's fairly narrow as far as these things go. But again, it was a new program, and that was to decide to add the 10 mills to the property tax, the ad valorem levy. So that's quite a bit to add all at once.
Sure.
But since then, every vote has not been to create any new taxes, but to keep renewing that 10 mil levy. And most of those have been fairly overwhelming in support. So that seemed to be the story of tonight, is that people are still satisfied with the program. They like the road improvements and the new roads the program has been bringing to Tupelo, and they want to see more of that, is I think what we can take away from this. Now, as with previous elections, turnout was also quite
Sure.
low. About not even 2,000 people came to the polls today to vote, and there are something like 20,000 registered voters in Tupelo. But Greg Perkle,
So
he's
less than 10%.
Yeah, less, so 8%, I think,
Yeah.
thereabout is the number. Major Thoroughfare Committee Chairman Greg Perkle somewhat takes that as a positive sign, which is people are satisfied. If they didn't like the program, if they wanted to see it go away, they probably, in his view, would have showed up to vote against it.
Sure.
The fact that
not opposition.
the fact that they don't feel motivated to come to the polls means most people either frankly don't know about the program, and you always have those low information voters, or they're fine with it.
You mentioned maybe people who don't know about it, and I know that you've done your part to educate people on it with lots of stories, and you've been on the podcast, which I'll mention. Some of you are watching this live right now through a webcast at djournal.com. Some of you are listening to this on the Memo podcast, which will be out on Wednesday afternoon. But for those who, despite all your best efforts, aren't really familiar with it, tell us a little bit about the Major Thoroughfare Program and its history and what it will do.
Sure thing. So as I mentioned, there's a tax levy that generates about $20 million over a 5-year time span. 5 years is the length of each renewal cycle. So it was renewed, and it was created in 91, renewed in 96, 2001, and so on and so forth to today. So over those 5 years, about 20 million is generated. And at the beginning of each cycle, when the program goes on the ballot for renewal, the committee has approved a certain number of projects. The 20 million isn't just out there for the city or the committee to do whatever they want to with. There's a certain number of projects that have been approved to receive this funding. Now, there are probably more projects on the list than there will be money to pay for it. So not everything on the list will probably get done, but money can only go toward projects that are on the list. So doing things a little bit different this year, 15 of the 20 million are going to go toward new projects. And those are things like adding some additional lanes on North Gloucester between intersections of Barnes Crossing and the Natchez Trace overpass, doing some different things, not quite sure what, that's still in the design process, but some different things to a Barnes Crossing Road to help with traffic flow. Maybe some examination of adding right-hand turn lanes on North Gloucester at some of those busy retail centers so that traffic doesn't back up in the right-hand travel lane. Perhaps 3-laning West Jackson Street extended, perhaps 3-laning West Jackson Street between the intersections of Clayton and Robbins. Now, frankly, just me personally, I'm not sure I expect that that project to happen
Sure.
this time around. Officials have admitted it's an expensive project. Their business is very close to the road as it currently exists. So I think it would be very difficult to add the turn lane like they're wanting to do. But I mean, we'll see. Maybe they'll figure out a way to make it happen. But those are the projects that can happen over the next 5 years. And then $5 million will go toward maintenance. And again, it's not neighborhood streets. I'm afraid the road that your house is on is not
Sure.
that the city has its own paving program for that. This major thoroughfare maintenance money will go toward maintaining major thoroughfares themselves, and then what they call the major collector streets that funnel into the major thoroughfares. So West Jackson, for example, is, I mean, some people might consider it a major thoroughfare, but I believe technically it's a collector for North Gloucester.
But in a way too, of course, as you mentioned, this doesn't go towards neighborhood streets, but you had a story the other day where the mayor said, more or less, if this doesn't pass, we'll find funds to do these repairs, but it'll come from somewhere else. So by this passing and taking care of all these major thoroughfare roads, I guess it gives the city more money for whether it's paving neighborhood streets or whether it's other programs that they want to do, I guess.
That's right. Exactly. The city, I mean, North Gloucester is going to get maintained, whether major thoroughfare passes or not. You can't have potholes on a road that important, or any of our other, 5-lane roads. But if major thoroughfare has its own money to pay for that maintenance, then those are less roads the city, as you said, has to maintain. So that gives them more money either for the normal paving budget, that would be your neighborhood streets, or for other projects. I believe what Mayor Shelton told me was, if major thoroughfare had failed tonight, no renewal, then the city has the resources to maintain all the roads that are currently in the city limits, including the major thoroughfares. But if the city had to maintain all those roads out of its own funds, some priorities would have to change. And that would mean, as he said, certain neighborhood redevelopment projects might not happen, certain quality of life projects might not happen. Of course, what would have gotten the axe, but we don't know, because
we'll never know.
The program sailed through quite handily.
You mentioned some projects that might not get done in this phase, and it seems like maybe the MO of this through the years has been even programs, sometimes they're put on there, and the ones that don't get done in one phase, maybe those are the ones we'll see leading off, when phase 7 happens in 5 years. But what will happen? What are kind of going to be some of the first projects or the main ones that you think will happen from this phase?
Right. The first thing we should expect to start seeing dollars go toward is technically a phase 5 project. That's adding an interchange between Thomas Street and Highway 6. Now, the way it turned out, by the end of phase 5, they had a little money left, enough to start Thomas Street, that interchange, but not enough to see it through. So the city had committed that if major thoroughfare did not pass, then the city would go ahead and provide the funds, giving them the confidence to go ahead and start on that project, with the understanding that if major thoroughfare passed, part of the phase 6 money would go toward finishing that project. So that's the first thing we should expect to see happening, is just the continuation of that. Other than that, Greg Perkle, committee chairman, told me tonight their next step is to go through the process of selecting an engineer, so then they can start doing some of the design work for some of these projects. And then the committee will have to decide priorities. What do we want to start designing? What do we want to start making happen? Now, you'll bring up that list again.
Yeah,
I
I was gonna ask you if you
believe,
had a sense for which ones are
yeah,
most
certain
likely.
things. The North Gloucester, they've already told me, city officials, MDOT, Mississippi Department of Transportation, is doing its own study of North Gloucester.
This is the signalization study you're talking
No,
about?
not just the
It's separate?
signalization. They're doing just a study of North Gloucester and may even, out of their own funds, do certain projects.
Turn lanes.
Maybe they haven't
Okay.
finished
What
the
they'll do,
study.
yeah.
Basically, what MDOT has said is, hey, don't start doing stuff to North Gloucester, at least until we finish our study.
Sure.
Because technically North Gloucester is an MDOT road.
Okay.
So, if the city can get MDOT to pay for some stuff,
Then they can use the money
yeah,
elsewhere.
exactly.
Yeah.
But I think certainly there is a reconfiguration of the Easton Boulevard and US 45 interchange. I believe what I'm hearing, that probably is likely to happen this phase. The additional lanes on North Gloucester might happen. That just depends on MDOT. Also, we're looking at adding some lanes to Easton Boulevard between Veterans Boulevard and Briar Ridge
Right by
Road.
ICC, I guess, which I know I've seen. I mean, that can really jumble up people trying to turn left in ICC right there.
Exactly. So so they want to 5-lane that stretch between, so that would be 5-lane Easton between the intersections of Veterans and Briar Ridge. So I think that is likely to happen probably soon.
Sure.
That the 5-laning on Easton between that stretch and reconfiguration of the Easton Boulevard and the US 45 interchange are probably two projects that might end up being the first things that happen, partly because they're already designed or almost designed, where some of the other projects have a little bit more legwork that has to happen before dirt could start getting moved.
Sure. I've covered, I guess, in my time on the education beat, a couple of school bond issues where, I mean, for one, there was a significance in the funds that they got to do different work. But for both of them, one for Tupelo schools and one for Lee County schools, were almost as significant as kind of building momentum for the district, that you're saying that there's people behind you and the efforts that you're doing. And in some ways, for both of those, it was almost bigger than just the bonds and the funding. Is it like that here? Does this create any momentum for the city or the administration, or this is kind of such a unique program that not really, it's kind of a different?
I think we're finishing 25 years of the program, and this will be another 5 years. So I think it's tough for any one administration, certainly Mayor Shelton's administration coming in on 25 years, to kind of take this and make it, about a show of support for any specific administration projects. Certainly, though, tonight, Mayor Shelton, is wanting to emphasize that this is a new chapter, he believes, a continuing chapter of the Tupelo story. And he thinks certainly his administration's goals, its focuses on neighborhood redevelopment, its initiatives, say downtown, the trail connection between downtown and Elvis Presley birthplace and museum. Certainly, Mayor Shelton believes the projects that are important, that are priorities of his, are working in concert with helping support the same kind of goals that that Major Thoroughfare is also supporting. But I think Major Thoroughfare has been around so long and has achieved the same level of support consistently. If we had seen a dramatic turnaround from, say, barely passing to a passing by these kinds of numbers, that might indicate a sea change in the voters or new feelings. But I feel like we're kind of just seeing the same story of Major. People are used to it. They like it. They're happy with keeping it. I'm not sure if that means one way or the other about how voters feel about Mayor Shelton right now.
You can't really read anything into it.
Yeah, I think we'll just have to wait until the next municipal election to see whether this kind of translates to the feeling that the administration is pleasing the voters.
People are happy, sure. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we wrap this up?
I think, just we've discussed most of the significant things. Record high support for the program. technically
But
nearly
sure.
record low turnout, even while the margin of support was record high. We'll talk about this again in 5 years when the program is in its 30th year.
Yeah, wow. It's hard to believe how fast it goes. It'll be before you know it. So, well, thanks, Caleb. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to everyone for watching. And have a good night.